Greetings, this is a man who pretends to be Charles Darwin, and I'm speaking to you from an apple orchard in Alsace in eastern France. Actually, I'm a transplanted Cherokee, as you can see from this shirt. I'm actually from America, but right now I'm living in Alsace in France. And apples are very commonly raised in Alsace, as are walnuts and cabbages. And you can also get lots of bacon, and you can put these together into what is known as an Alsatian salad, which is all of those things put together. It's actually pretty good. What I'm here to talk to you about today, however, is what are orchards like? This is not anything like a wild forest with trees. And what I'm saying to you about this orchard in Alsace is the same thing that is also true about orchards in America. And what an orchard is like that is different from a forest is that it is just one kind of tree. As a matter of fact, one breed of tree. This is not just apples, but it's just one breed of apples forming this entire orchard. And also you will notice there are no other kinds of competing plants. There's no weeds, bushes. So the orchard is the trees are able to use all of the resources of sunlight and soil for their own growth. Now, I'm going to tell you that Native Americans had orchards. And I explain that in chapter 6 of my book, Forgotten Landscapes. Now, Native American orchards didn't look anything like this. They did not have this kind of orchard. Instead, what they would usually do is they would start with a forest, and instead of cutting the forest down and planting just one kind of tree, which was a lot of work, what they would do is they would find a forest in which the kinds of fruits or nuts that they wanted to have, such as pecans, for instance, or chestnuts. And they really liked chestnuts, so they really liked pecans. And so what they would do is they would start with a forest that already had a lot of chestnuts in it, and then they would plant more chestnuts. They might remove a few of the competing tree seedlings of other species, but what they would have is they would start with a chestnut forest, and they would end up with a forest that had more chestnuts in it. So they would plant more, they would also set fire, they would change the microclimate, and by doing those things, according to forest ecologist Thomas Bonnickson, actually, you could start with a forest that was before the natives came, that would have maybe 4% chestnuts, and you would end up with a forest that was 40% chestnuts. You would end up with a forest that was enhanced 10 times over with the amount of chestnuts, and that's exactly what the natives wanted to eat. This also happened in the southern part of the United States with pecans. There are pecan groves that occur naturally, but what often happened is the natives would enhance the amount of pecans that were present. They would plant more pecans in places where pecans were already growing. Therefore, they knew that pecans could grow there, and that therefore it was likely that they could grow more pecans there. They just loved pecans. They would not only eat the nuts, but they would grind up the nuts into a meal and make soup out of it called canucci, and they still do that today. In California, there were lots of oak trees, and whole Native American economies were based upon acorns that they would eat. And although the acorns occurred naturally, the natives would plant a few more acorns and get a few more oak trees, and they would trim and prune the trees that were already there. So they didn't plant all of the trees, they just altered the forest that was already there. Perhaps the most extreme example of Native Americans changing the landscape in order to produce an orchard is the case of the California palm oases. There's desert areas in the east of San Diego. There are desert areas where there are oases, but these oases today consist almost entirely of the California fan palm Washingtonia folifera, which produces a delicious fruit that is very similar to the date palms that come from the Middle East. And so what would happen is we couldn't really explain why these wet areas in the desert consisted only of California fan palms. Why aren't there other kinds of trees there? Well, according to one ecologist, the reason is because Native Americans planted the date palms there. Actually, it was the fan palms that they planted there, and they got rid of the other things that were growing there, so that you ended up with little clusters just of California fan palms with their delicious fruits. Well, these are all some of the things that Native Americans did to natural forests or natural clusters of desert woody plants, and produced their version of orchards. Not as productive as the orchards that we have today, such as these, but productive enough, and it certainly was good enough for their purposes and was not a whole lot of work. I describe this, as I said, in chapter 6 of my book, and I hope you check it out. This is The Man Who Pretends to be Charles Darwin. Tally ho, and amen.